Yeah, in answer to your question, yeah, it's okay to record this conversation. Obviously, it's not a sermon, but I should probably still, I think it'd be a good idea to just say that I can't give permission to promulgate or publish this just because those are the kind of restrictions I'm living under. Next question. Yeah, good examples in these kind of situations. Yeah, All the Martyrs, a really great book that certainly is online. I don't know if it's being published right now, but Victories of the Martyrs by St. Alphonsus. And so he's got all kinds of vignettes. So there'd be like 1 to 3 or 4 pages on the lives of different martyrs. And you can see this. And his explanations, because it's a doctrine of the church, just the first couple of chapters, even if one couldn't get but the importance of the martyrs, that would be fantastic to read, because you can see the different kind of things they're suffering for. And that's one of the things that anybody could meditate on fruitfully, is to say, all these thousands and millions of people that have died for the faith, and died for any particular truth in the faith, and they saw how that it was worth dying for. And then you can stop and ask yourself, do I see this as worth dying for? Would I be willing to die for any single one of the truths in the creed? And if not, why not? And if not, then I better pray for that grace. Because what is wrong with me? My faith is so weak. What is so important about my life? Nobody gets out of this booger alive. Why don't I see that? Because if I don't see that, I better start praying till I do see that. Because my faith is very weak. And yet I would not hesitate to say that that's pretty much standard, as people wouldn't. And, that's why the martyrs are so important. And I would beg them for that. At every Mass, this is something I heard Father John Hardin say in a recording. I think I was a seminarian when I heard it. But he said at the elevation of the precious blood, you should ask for the grace to live as a martyr. God gives the grace of dying as a martyr to whom he will. But if you ask for that at every elevation, you'll get it. And to live as a martyr is a faithful witness. They're being faithful and witnessing to the truths of the church. And that's what we have to have, is faithfulness. So we need this really solid grounding in the faith. And so many people don't have it. They can't, they open the Bible and they tee-hee and ha-ha and like they're smarter than God. It's just so unbelievable and so standard. And I'm not just talking about the priests. Well, if we're going to be like that, nobody does that to their Father, and then they do it to God. If God said so, then that's the way it is. I don't have to understand everything. Have some humility. But the martyrs are so important. So with God in Russia, Father Chiswick, this Jesuit, and He Leadeth Me, those 2 books, especially He Leadeth Me, because that's his spiritual book. Here's a man, he's from Pennsylvania, coal country, and he's a Jesuit, and he volunteers for the Russian missions. And so then he goes into Russia. He gets captured basically right away, put in Lubyanka prison, most horrible prison in Moscow, this KGB prison, all this torture. He's in there, I think, 5 years. And then he off to Siberia, I guess. And he's finally liberated. So I don't remember, it's 20 some years roughly, and then he's liberated, and he comes back in the 60s on some kind of exchange. But He Leadeth Me is a fantastic book where one can read, because he's talking about exactly how do you deal with it when he's in this situation, in an atheistic, communistic, we're going into a communistic regime. That's what's going on. Fatima's, like a big surprise at Fatima's unfolding before our eyes. So with God in Russia, there's another one, dramatically different in many, many ways, because he's not a prisoner, but it's in the shadow of his rings. And I can't remember the name of this is a German priest. He was a Franciscan seminarian during the Third Reich, and then he gets drafted into the Waffen-SS. And it's absolutely amazing. And he even gets in Himmler's face. Absolutely amazing book. He Leadeth Me. So that one. And that's very encouraging too, because you see the absolute importance of sticking to your principles, come what may. And you see the power of prayer. There's a lot of very important lessons in that. So with God in Russia, He Leadeth Me, I would recommend those. Another thing to think about is the Chinese church. The underground church in China, you can get good information from the Cardinal Kung Foundation, Kung, the Cardinal Kung Foundation, and read about it. There's an approved apparition of Our Lady some years ago that appeared to thousands of them and encouraging them and all that. These people have been suffering now since the 1940s. 1949, I think. So they've suffered under Mao Zedong and all these communist stuff, and right now unbelievably suffering. And they've been suffering for union with the church. There was a Chinese Patriotic Association. It's like I think it's either the last encyclical or the second to last encyclical written by Pius XII. And it's about the situation over there because there were bishops consecrated against the will of the Pope. And so the Chinese had actual bishops consecrated, and then they're agents of the state. By the way, that's very interesting because that's a typical communist thing. But it's one of the errors of Russia, because orthodoxy, in its sense, has the bishops be tools of the regime. And so that's one of the spiritual errors of Russia. You see it right now there, and you see it in America, because we've just seen this incredible spectacle, and this is just a parenthetical remark, where the bishops basically are the enforcers of the regime. They've been more strict and over the top vis-a-vis all these COVID restrictions and all that than anyone. Shutting things down and so forth. I mean, to a man. I don't know if there was a bishop in this country that didn't do it. There might be, and I'm very happy to be corrected. So I'm not trying to speak out of line or whatever. But when I saw that, I just was like, well, there we are. Error of Russia. Principal error of Russia right here is the regime is going to make these kind of demands on the sacrifice offered to God. And so we see that right before our very eyes. I'm certainly not accusing them of being the exact equivalent of the Chinese Patriotic Association bishops. That's not my point. I'm just pointing out spiritually you have the same phenomenon. So anyway, in China. So you have this above ground church, and for years it's been aided by things like the Jesuits and the Maryknollers taught them how to say the new Mass, and they'd have their guys over here going to our seminaries and so forth. And these are communist regime type ones. Well, the underground church is down there suffering, and saying Mass, kneeling in the snow in a dump. Stuff like that. There was one of their seminaries was in a barn, and the guys would go there and they'd stay there 5 years, and priests would wander by and come in and go out, and they'd go through and they'd get ordained, and they know they're going to spend most of their life with the Laogai, which is their system of prison camps and so forth. Anyway, they've suffered. So they're spiritually the healthiest particular church in our day and age. Those people have paid the price for union with Christ. And now their suffering has been increased because they have done all this for union with the Pope. And now the Pope has said that the communist bishops, he's recognized them. And they've supported the one-child policy. They're definitely, it's just, it's spectacular. Anyway, and so the Pope has ordered them to be under them. So in order to stay in union with the Pope, they can't go under these people. It's extraordinary. They have to disobey the Pope, and I'm putting disobey because it's outside the scope of his authority. Because he's only the Pope. He's only the Pope. Bishops are only bishops. Priests are only priests. There's a scope of authority. Within that authority, we must obey on any legitimate command. Not questionable. But outside the scope of authority, it's like, whatever. So to give a comparison that's ridiculous, but makes it easy to understand, is if the priest gets up there and says, everybody in my community is going to have to drive Volkswagen from now on. You can't go to Mass. You'd be like, whatever, what's wrong with this guy? It's outside your scope of authority. It's ridiculous. Well, I'm using that so people can see he doesn't have that authority. He has lots of authority, but he doesn't. What I'm driving makes no. Let's go. The Pope doesn't have the authority to tell you basically to go under non-Catholic bishops, and he just doesn't have that authority. Okay. He doesn't have the authority to tell you to worship false gods, etc. Yeah. To go back to the thing, the people that are an example, the Chinese underground Catholics, they're unbelievably solid in their faith. And they've been tested in fire. And it's good to look at too, because we're going to have that in our own way. That's absolutely coming up. And we shouldn't have any illusions. Don't have any illusions.